Welcome to Passion for Sound, the channel dedicated to thorough and honest reviews of headphones, earphones, DACs, headphone amps, other components and accessories. Basically everything audio related except power amps and passive speakers. My name's Lachlan and my goal is to explore and discuss all kinds of audio topics, even the controversial ones, to help us all find more enjoyment from music. Thanks for watching and enjoy the video. Hey folks, welcome to another Passion for Sound audio review, and today a look at the Schiit IEMagni. I reviewed a whole range of Schiit products on the channel in recent times, and the last few have been absolute winners. But thinking back just a little bit further to amps like the Magnus and the Heresy, things weren't quite as rosy in my reviews of those. So I was really excited to hear what Schiit had come up with when it came to the IEMagni, knowing that it's kind of an evolution of the Heresy that I didn't particularly like, but also trusting in the overall direction and tuning that Schiit apply to most of their products. And so that left me wondering whether it would sit closer to the slightly edgy, slightly harsh sound of the Heresy, or whether they'd managed to produce something that was a bit more organic and enjoyable to listen to. So when Schiit were kind enough to send me an IEMagni for review, I jumped at the opportunity. In case you're not familiar, the IEMagni retails for $119 US. That makes it 165 Australian dollars on a straight conversion, not including any shipping, import tariffs and the like. As I've discussed before on this channel, buying it locally here in Australia can mean paying significantly more for the product than you probably should, and therefore I do recommend that those of you in Australia, and possibly other countries as well, but I can't speak to those, do look at buying direct from Schiit if you're looking at these products. I can say from experience, and also from chatting to some of my patrons, their experiences as well, that the shipping and the turnaround time is really quick once back orders and whatnot are out of the way, of course, that once the product is available, getting it to you is really fast. So do think about buying direct from Schiit if you're in a country where you can, and if the local prices seem too inflated to you. But anyway, let's put all that out of the way and focus on the product at hand, which is the Schiit IEMagni. So this tiny little package here, that as you can see is not that much bigger than what, probably 2 packs of playing cards sitting side by side and a little bit thicker, that little device for $119 US is going to give you 2.4 watts into 32 ohms. That level of power output is just ridiculous from a device like this. But it's not new, it's exactly the same as what the Magni 3 Plus and the Heresy have been doing for some time now. The difference with this product is it brings a couple of new features and technologies into play. As the name would suggest with the IEMagni, it is designed to drive IEMs effectively. Not that it is an IEM amplifier, just that it can do everything now, including IEMs. Part of that is the circuitry they've built into the amp to make sure it's got a really dark black background. But it's also about one of these switches on the back giving you now 3 gain levels. So you've got low for IEMs, then you've got medium and high for more demanding headphones. Before we get into the power outputs and all of that sort of stuff, let's do a quick tour. It's a very simple amp, as you've already gathered from me waving it around here, but let's step through it anyway. On the front we've got the Magni logo, which is pretty hard to see because of the black and grey design, so it is in grey text there on the front. We've got the compact style volume knob that Schiit use on all of their devices of this size, and I'm not a huge fan of the feel of the knob. It's a little bit too narrow for my liking, but at the same time it would have been hard for them to do anything bigger than that, so it's completely fine. It feels nice to turn, it's got good motion to it, so I've got no complaints there. It's just that it would have been nice had they had the space to provide a slightly chunkier volume knob. Moving on, we've got a 6.3mm headphone jack output, and given that this is designed to drive IEMs as well as full-sized headphones, it would have been lovely if they'd been able to find the space for a 3.5mm connector here, but I do understand in a chassis this tiny, space is going to be limited. So it's not a big deal, I'm not suggesting it's a drawback of the amp, it just would have been really, really cool had they been able to build in a 3.5mm output. But as I said, not a reason to not buy this amp, just something that would have been an extra value add. Now what you might be noticing having looked at the front now is that something is missing that you might want regularly on an amplifier like this. And unfortunately, the same topic I've talked about before is going to raise its head when we come round to the back. So when we look at the back of the amplifier, I'm going to start over on the power supply side. We've got a power supply input there, and that's once again using an AC wall wart. So this is not going to work with your DC linear power supplies. It is an AC wall wart supply. What that does, as I understand it, is makes it easier for them to minimize the power circuitry inside the amp, because you need alternating current to produce an output signal. By having an AC input, you can dedicate more of the circuitry on the inside to the amplification, or of course you can just keep the device smaller. So you've got AC coming in there. We've then got here a power switch. I don't particularly mind the power switch on the back. I've learned to live with it with Schiit products. I did cover this off in my interview that I did with Jason Stoddard from Schiit some time ago, and it's a design decision that I understand. It's all about things like the look and feel of all of their products having a level of consistency, and also about the design of the overall layout of the circuit boards, and of course their metal printing as well. So I understand the decision having the power switch on the back. I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but it's not a deal breaker for me. The other switch though, in a second, we're going to talk about a bit more. Before we get there, we've got a pair of RCA outputs, which are variable, meaning you can use this as a preamp for powered speakers. Then we've got the aforementioned gain switch. I'm going to come back around to it because I just want to quickly mention you've then got your RCA inputs. So most of the back is really straightforward, but I do want to talk about this gain switch. This is an amplifier that's been designed specifically with the purpose of driving low impedance, sensitive IEMs all the way through to full-sized power-hungry headphones. Because of that, it's got this wonderful variable gain control, which in my use of the amp, I've had to switch to all 3 levels. With that in mind, I do think it's a shame that they couldn't put the gain switch on the front. As I touched on when talking about the power switch, I get that it's all about the consistency of the design, the look, the simplicity of the layout of the circuit board inside, so I get the reasoning behind it, and I'm certainly not looking to jump up and down and make this a big issue, but I do want to raise the fact that I think it's a real shame that that gain switch wasn't on the front for an amplifier that's specifically designed to give you such range and versatility. Of course, if you're only using it to drive a pair of headphones or a set of IEMs, or even all IEMs, pretty much every IEM is going to run on low gain. If you're only doing that with it, it's a non-issue, and forget everything I'm saying about the placement of the switch. But if you're like me, and you've got a few IEMs, and then some sensitive headphones, and then maybe some more difficult headphones, that placement of the switch is going to get a little bit annoying. The good news is, and this was a clever thing if they did it deliberately, they have separated where the switches are. So if you've got the amplifier on the desk in front of you and you're reaching over the back blind, there's no chance of you confusing which switch is which. So that's really positive. You can very quickly and easily work out which one's power and which one's gain, even when you can't see it reaching over the back. So I'm not going to harp on any further about it. I do think it's a shame. It's not a deal breaker, but on an amp like this, would have been great to see the gain switch on the front. Other than that, I think it's a great compact design. Paired up with a Modi multi-bit, whichever of the range you want, this is going to be an absolute killer little stack. Now for the record, I did try to organise to get a Modi for review at the same time, so I could do a little compact desktop stack, but unfortunately, with all the backorder issues going on, it's much more important that Schiit are sending products to people out there who've paid for it in advance and are sitting on a backorder queue, rather than sending it to me as a reviewer. So unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly how it pairs up with a Modi or a Modi multi-bit, but what I can tell you, and I will tell you in a moment, is how it sounds fed from devices like the Bifrost 2 and the Chord Hugo TT2, both of which are probably overkill for an amp of this price and performance, but why not feed it the best you can and see what it's capable of? Before we get there though, I do want to talk about power performance. As the specifications would suggest, this is an amp that can provide sufficient power for pretty much every headphone on the planet, including the Susvara. Now, I'm not recommending that anyone should buy a Susvara to pair it with an IEMagni, but the beauty of it is that it's got the power to drive those sorts of headphones to reasonable listening levels at good enough quality. Not great quality, but good enough. Certainly if you're pairing it with IEMs or normal everyday headphones that aren't in that stratospheric level of the Susvaras, the IEMagni could be enough headphone amp for pretty much anybody. To put the power levels into perspective, I stepped through a range of my difficult to drive headphones as well as some IEMs to give you a bit of a sense. I'm going to start with the most difficult, which I've already mentioned, being the Headphone and Stand, and I was listening at comfortable listening levels, so somewhere in the 75 to 85 dB range, from the IEMagni in high gain with the volume knob at about the 1 o'clock position. Now, to put that into context, the volume goes all the way up to about the 5 o'clock position, so I still had plenty of power left, maybe 40% of what this is capable of still available as headroom. So it does have enough power for normal listening levels of very, very difficult headphones when using high gain. As I said, amping quality is a whole different story, but quantity of power is absolutely there. I also tried this with the Headphone and Aria. I've got those coming up for review soon, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. The Aria was driven in medium gain at about the 12 o'clock position. The DT880 250 ohm special edition that I've got, the black ones, that was also driven in medium gain, but now back up at around 1 o'clock. And so having proved that the amp could handle all of the different headphones that I've got that are somewhat more difficult to drive, I then went the other direction and tried it with some really simple IEMs. One of the biggest challenges that we have with powerful headphone amplifiers like these is that when you plug in your IEMs, you've only got about 2 millimeters of room on the volume pot to get yourself out of the realm of channel imbalance right down the bottom here, and then get to a level that's actually comfortable to listen to without going too high. The good news is, with the IEMagni in low gain, something that's quite sensitive like the Sennheiser IE900 allowed me to comfortably turn the volume all the way up to 11. Not 11 in a Spinal Tap sense of the 11s, but 11 representing a comfortable listening level. And then still lots of headroom to go up, but more importantly with IEMs, also enough room to get beyond any channel imbalance. In fact, it was too quiet for me to tell if there was channel imbalance in low gain mode, because I needed to get at least to about 9 o'clock before I even started hearing anything meaningful. Of course, the volume does ramp up, so I'm not saying it suddenly kicks in. My point being, it does get very, very quiet if you want it to, and of course, there's zero noise because of that very, very low gain level. So in terms of managing power and making this a very versatile amplifier, Schiit have absolutely nailed it. This is a wonderful, versatile device in terms of being able to provide for every headphone you might have in your collection. So of course that then leads us to the question of how does it sound? And there were a couple of hesitations for me coming into this review. As I'd already said, the Heresy left me a little bit cold. It wasn't a bad amplifier, but it was just a little bit edgy, maybe a bit digital you could call it, and I didn't necessarily enjoy it. Knowing that the Heresy is an op-amp design, which is unusual from Schiit, compared to something like the discrete Asgard 3 here or the Magni 3 Plus, and knowing how much I love their discrete designs compared to their op-amp designs, I was a little bit nervous when I discovered that the IEMagni is using an op-amp design. That had me just a little bit concerned. I traditionally don't enjoy op-amp amps as much. It's not to say I don't enjoy any of them, but I normally enjoy discrete amps significantly more. I was also then on top of that wary of the past sound I'd heard from the Magnus and the Heresy as both being just a bit edgy. And so I'm pleased to say I was very, very pleasantly surprised when I fired up the IEMagni. I listened to it with headphones like the Empyreans, the Arias, the IE900s that I mentioned before, some more basic stuff like the Vera 1, the Sivka P2 when I was preparing for my recent planar magnetic battle, and it drove everything I plugged into it absolutely beautifully. And I don't just mean in terms of power now, I am talking quality. The sound from the IEMagni is wonderfully clean and accurate, but never sterile, never edgy, never digital. And when I say digital, obviously it's all analog sound, but my point being that sometimes things get just a bit kind of grainy or harsh or edgy with amps like the Heresy, for example, and I never found the IEMagni to stray into that space. Things were consistently enjoyable, but still very clean and accurate. Something else that really stood out to me as well, and I think it first jumped out when I paired this up with the Vera 1 from Vera Audio, was that the IEMagni produces a really wonderful sense of separation and clarity in the soundstage. The soundstage is a bit two-dimensional, as tends to be the norm for op-amp based designs, but within that relatively flat soundstage, it does produce a great sense of separation and image focus. The overall sound then from the IEMagni is one that is clean and accurate, with a good sense of focus and image, a somewhat 2D soundstage but a very good soundstage, and then a very tight and clean bass presentation. So there's absolutely nothing I can complain about in the sound from the IEMagni. If you told me that this was the only amp I could ever use for the rest of my life, I'd be a bit sad to lose some of the amps I've got, of course, but it wouldn't worry me at all. I would still be able to thoroughly enjoy everything I ever plugged into it and listened to through it. So we're doing great here. We've got a fantastic, compact, well-priced amp that to me, in isolation, sounds wonderful. So of course, if you're used to my channel, you'll know the next thing for me was to see how does it compare to some competition. The first amp that I turned to, and I get that this is a completely different style of amp, but it's in the same price bracket. The first amp I turned to was the xDuoo MT602. So this is priced identically to the IEMagni. It's $119 US, and that was the reason I put the two of them up against each other. Obviously, if you're in the market for a solid state, you might not even be looking at tubes and vice versa. But there's also some of you out there that might be saying, I've got $120 to spend on an amp, which way should I go? And the answer is, it really depends a lot on what you're looking for. Firstly, the xDuoo MT602 absolutely cannot drive IEMs effectively. It's got way too much gain, and unless you've got a DAC that's allowing you to pull down the output signal a huge amount, you're not going to get any decent use of IEMs out of it. Beyond that, the sound from the two is then very, very different. Whether IEMagni is clean and accurate and well-defined, transparent, all those wonderful terms, the 602 is distinctly coloured in comparison. The soundstage presentation is also a huge area of separation for these two. The IEMagni, as I've already talked about, tends to make things quite flat and two-dimensional, but with excellent separation of all the different sounds. The MT602 tends to bring everything in and make it more of a sort of a conical shaped soundstage that's quite claustrophobic in comparison. The MT602, I wrote in my notes, is a little bit like listening to the music as if you were looking at the performance through sort of a fisheye lens, whereas I felt like the IEMagni was less like there was anything between me and the music. It wasn't perfectly realistic and lifelike, but it was much, much closer. Overall, what I'd say is that the MT602 is just consistently less clear, transparent, and resolving. It's still a lovely sounding amp, and it's great if you want to dabble with tubes, but it doesn't come to the level of clarity and accuracy and transparency that the IEMagni does. Probably for me though, the biggest test of the IEMagni was to see how it compared against my all-time favourite budget amplifier so far in the Schiit Asgard 3. The Asgard 3 retails for $199 US, so it's not a huge stretch more. Obviously, it's an extra $80, which in the scheme of $119 plus $80, you're nearly doubling your price, but at the same time, it's not out of reach for most people. When you go to the Asgard 3, you're getting a much bigger design, so it's a much larger case. You've got internal power management with a mains power socket, but beyond that, it's pretty similar. You've only got 2 gain settings versus 3, so this won't be quite as usable for very sensitive IEMs. But in many other ways, they're very comparable. Both are single-ended, both sound great, both come from Schiit, of course, and so it was a really good comparison in my mind to see what you're getting if you spend more money. For this test, I listened to the track Jolie Jolie by Ricky Lee Jones. It's a really nicely recorded track, and it gave me some great insight into these two. Specifically, what it showed me was that the Asgard 3 is a much richer, warmer sounding amp comparatively to the IEMagni. In particular, what I noticed was the bass from the Asgard 3 was a little bit sort of fuller and probably a touch slower sounding compared to the very tight and well-controlled IEMagni bass. When comparing the two, it was hard initially for me to work out which one was actually truer to the recording, and so I tried the same track through the Hugo TT2, which is incredibly accurate and transparent. What I found was the IEMagni does sit between the two, between the Asgard 3 and the TT2, but it certainly sits closer to the TT2 than it does to the Asgard 3, meaning that I think the IEMagni is the more accurate, transparent, and probably true to source out of these two amplifiers. That's not to say the Asgard 3 is bad. It's a fun, enjoyable, engaging amplifier, and I love it for that. But the IEMagni is probably more tonally accurate to the original source recording. Still on this comparison though, it is worth noting one area that I find the Asgard 3 does pull significantly ahead of the IEMagni, and that is in the separation of sounds. Thanks to the discrete design within the Asgard 3, it does a better job at producing a depth in soundstage and a sense of layering of the sounds. The IEMagni, as I've already said, tends to make things a little bit more two-dimensional and flat. The end result of that is that when you listen to things like guitars and vocals, particularly things in the mid-range, I find the Asgard 3 does a better job at both separating them and positioning them in three-dimensional space. The IEMagni is not bad, but it is an area where the Asgard 3 is better. In the track I mentioned, Jolie Jolie, there's a number of different guitar elements going. They've got small little licks here and there throughout the track, and what I was finding was I was able to hear those and catch those more easily when listening with the Asgard 3. With the IEMagni, everything was wonderfully laid out and I could still hear all those instruments, but it was like they were less present in the overall sound, and so my attention wasn't drawn to them, or at least they weren't as available to me when I wanted to listen for them. It's a hard one to describe because it's a very subtle distinction between the two, but it is something that I value in my playback. Having said that, I also value the tonal accuracy of the IEMagni. And so for me, these are two different flavours of amp that you could almost justify having both of them. You could plug into the IEMagni when you wanted to run your IEMs, and or when you wanted to hear a tonally accurate representation. When you wanted more fun and more engagement, that's when you'd flip over to the Asgard 3. So I can absolutely see people potentially having both of these and having plenty of use for both of them in their collection. Ultimately, both are excellent amplifiers, and the IEMagni has really impressed me. Not only is it an op-amp designed amp that I find thoroughly enjoyable, which is not always common, but it's also a budget amp that has impressed me beyond my expectations for its price. There are definitely some great budget amps floating around. There's the Topping L30, there's the Trishelli Labs products, and of course the Asgard 3. There's lots of good stuff in that $100 to $200 price range. But for me, the IEMagni might just be the best I've heard at its price. It's definitely, in my mind, a better choice than the Heresy. I haven't yet heard the Magni 3 Plus, so I can't compare that. But I think out of the Topping L30 or the IEMagni, I'd be going for the IEMagni. I haven't compared them side by side, so I'm just going on memory. This has impressed me even more than the L30, which I think I started the review by saying, stop the review immediately and go buy one. I should have probably started this review the same way. It's a great amp. If you're in the market for it and you're looking at spending roughly this sort of price on an amp, just buy the IEMagni and love every second to be listening thereafter. If that sounds like a good solution for you, I'll put a link down below through to Schiit where you can buy the IEMagni for yourself. To be clear, there's no kickbacks, there's no affiliates, it's just a way of saying thank you to Schiit for sending out the demo unit for review. As always, I hope you found this review useful. I've certainly enjoyed sharing this one with you. It's a wonderful product that I think lots and lots of people are really going to love. And so if you have enjoyed this review and you'd like to see more reviews like this one, please do hit the subscribe button and the like button to help me bring in content your way. For now though, I'll leave you to the music, so happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.